Hi, it is Niemira of CryptoCanucks, and we are at Blockchain Futurist Conference, and we are speaking with Matthew Spoke of AION Network. How are you, Matthew?
I'm great, Anna. How are you?
Very good. Nice to have you here too.
Thank you.
Like another conference, another challenge.
Yeah, I've been doing a few less of these recently, but this one's been a really exciting conference so far.
So why so?
I mean, it gets to be a lot after a while. I think we've been looking at the conference space. Last year we did a lot of traveling, a lot of speaking at events around the world. I think this year we heard a stat that there were 800 blockchain conferences going on in 2018. So it gets to be a lot if you say yes to everything.
So are you feeling that this conference is different in some way from any other conferences you've been at?
Well, for one, the caliber of speakers that they were able to pull together for this conference has been incredible. I mean, we spent some time yesterday with Charles Hoskinson of Cardano, and there's just been an incredible lineup of speakers that came together. It's obviously our hometown in Toronto. We're excited to support projects that are coming out of Toronto, but been very pleasantly impressed with how the turnout became.
I've noticed that there's a lot of speaking about values of the companies and hype versus value. Do you feel that actually the trends are changing nowadays, that it's more demanded from the companies?
I think what bothers me is that it sounds like the trend to talk about it is changing, but in reality I don't think it's changed all that much yet. I think more and more projects are talking about why substance needs to come before hype, but then the way they act and the priorities that they're putting forward and what they're optimizing towards still seems to be very hype focused. I mean, this is what I spoke about this morning at the conference is we're operating in a very difficult market environment right now. But if you fast forward far enough into the future, this doesn't matter, right? What matters is, are we going to get through this year building great software? Are we going to have proven that developers can use what we're building? Nobody's going to remember the little 10, 20, 30, 50% price changes that happened at the beginning of the crypto industry when we're 20 years in the future and we're using these things as kind of infrastructure to power future businesses. So I think it's important to kind of step back and realize that given where we're at versus how big we think this could become, all of this is insignificant. All these price changes, all this crypto winter talk is a distraction. And what's unfortunate is you see a lot of projects that tend to optimize towards these short-term metrics, saying, oh, how do I make sure that my price is stable? How do I make sure that there's active volume on exchanges? I see why that's the motivation, but I just want to go back to like 10 years from now, what are going to be the key milestones that we remember in the industry? We're not going to remember the milestones of, oh, remember when Ether hit $300. Like we're going to remember the milestone of remember when 10 million people got added into the financial system because decentralized technology enabled that. And that's not enough of the focus today in the conversation.
So it's more of a content delivery. So this is the concentration right now. So if the companies are starting, so what would be your advice for the companies if they would like to start right now? Because it's very difficult to emerge right now into that ecosystem, because there's already a lot of companies which are well established, including AION.
Well, this is a natural cycle. I mean, in a lot of industries, you see huge activity around fundraising and new projects being deployed, and this is what happened over the course of the last 18 months. But naturally, at some point in an industry, capital might dry up because the excitement is not there, right? So it happened in the dotcom era. There was probably a 5 to 7 year period of time where to start an internet company was nearly impossible. You couldn't find a venture capital investor that would give you money because they had all just gone through this massively painful downturn in the internet markets in like the late 90s, early 2000s. I don't think this is a bad thing. I think all of these things are going to come with cycles. If you're on the road raising money for a new project, I get it, it's difficult right now. If you've already raised your money, put your head down and focus. And this is why I've been spending a lot less time at conferences, a lot less time on the road, is we have stuff to prove on the technical side. And if we come out of this a year from now and we can say, hey, great milestone, we went to 100 conferences, or great milestone, look at how many people are using our software, that's what we're trying to optimize.
Because we raised a lot of money, that's another thing, right? So when we actually seeing everything, what is happening, do you think that it might happen that it's going to be like a dot-com bubble?
I don't think by any means this is large enough to be at that caliber. I mean, the dot-com industry before it crashed was $4 trillion in market cap among publicly traded dot-com stocks. We convince ourselves that we're an important industry, and then you zoom out and you realize $200 billion in the grand scheme of things is irrelevant, right? So we're all still living in this little insular world where we think we're the most important person in the room, but we realize nobody outside the room knows who we are. So I don't think we're at that stage, but I think it's healthy to see some sobriety come back into the market. Make people realize that, you know, doubling and tripling of value in assets in 2 months is not a natural thing. It's this art, but we've come to think that it's to be expected. Because if you grew up in the crypto industry, this is the norm in your mind, but in the real world, this is not the norm, right? So I think going back to like mediocre returns and, you know, less focus on these daily prices is a good thing for companies that actually want to take the software seriously. And it gives them a chance to just remove the distraction from the conversation and just focus on that substance.
Do you see the connection more of the future between blockchain and artificial intelligence? Do you see this, that those two might connect more and more?
Absolutely, it's something we talk a lot about internally. I think one of the things that's missing in my mind is, you know, we always hear the joke, the easiest way to do an ICO is put the word IoT, blockchain, AI, and robotics on the same slide deck, and all of a sudden, $100 million fundraise, right?
Yes.
But I think what's more important to realize is these convergence of technologies, they take time for a reason. It's, you know, we're already talking about how inefficient blockchains are for simple applications like CryptoKitties, for example, right? These simple applications don't have the infrastructure they need to survive. You want to start putting complex applications on, that's go from CryptoKitties to enterprise business processes. These are complex applications, even more unlikely that today the infrastructure can sustain them. You go to artificial intelligence, the infrastructure is nowhere near there. So I hear these projects coming out saying, you know, we're so excited to announce an AI blockchain protocol. It sounds great. I think we're a decade away from that being realistic. I think we need to start thinking about the requirements today of what the infrastructure needs to look like to be able to get there. Because trust in artificial intelligence is a topic that we don't often talk about, but AI's biggest risk in the future is you have to trust the companies that are publishing those AIs, right? So it's natural for me to think, hey, decentralized infrastructures to power artificial intelligence is important in the future, but you know, I can barely run a simple application on Solidity today, and you want me to start talking about AI computation on a blockchain? I think we're miles away from that.
So in summary, we can say that there is a comeback to virtuous values and ethics in the business.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I think that's what we should be emphasizing more. I think that's what, you know, people keeping these projects accountable should be pushing for that a lot more. And we're starting to see, like, we're pushing a lot more on like voluntary governance and disclosure requirements. How do we interact with our community? What information about our finances do we disclose? And how do we make decision-making structures transparent so that people can actually know AION came to this strategic decision because of these criteria? Right now there's a lot of opaqueness. You look into a project, you know, name 90% of projects out there, and it's very difficult to know how they're making decisions, how they're allocating their funding. You know, how do you know they're not squandering it? Transparency is in dire lack.
That's what I want to say, the transparency is the key. Matthew, really with that word, we are going to end our conversation, but I'm looking forward to more information from you in the future.
Thanks
so
so
thank
much,
you
Anna.
very much. Okay, thank you so much.